What's up, my friends, and welcome into another week of the Run It Back podcast. Tyler Zulli, Frank Klose, we're here with you once again. We're both back in studio, and we are we're just 1 week away. In fact, I believe at this point it's 8 days away from opening day, and we have a lot to get into: roster construction, players being reassigned and sent down to the minor league camps, what the Phillies' 26-man roster will look like, and of course, last night the World Baseball Classic ended with a 3-2 win for Team Venezuela over Team USA. We'll break it all down. But first, before we do that, Frank, I got to ask you, how was your trip?
Very good, of course. I wish I was still there. In fact, I was hoping in the bad weather on Monday that my flight would be canceled and I could stay a little bit more. But some of the people I was traveling with did not make it home on Monday. Lucky them. But yeah, my flight got out just fine early Monday morning and back to the grind. But it's just hard to believe that next week already is opening day. I feel like this is still the heart of spring training.
It does seem weird, and I think maybe in part because the World Baseball Classic has had our attention, where I've watched more WBC than I've watched spring training this year, and I wonder if that has kind of made it like jump up on us in terms of the regular season begins next week. The Phillies and Rangers play real baseball in 8 days. And I almost feel like I'm not ready for it yet because I've been so invested in the WBC that spring training almost has been put on the back burner a little bit.
Yeah, and it's an earlier start than often it is at March 26th to being opening day for the Phillies, and they're playing at home for opening day. I know a few times recently that they were the road team at first, so yeah, this is coming at us fast.
Well, the weather has changed like 17 times in the next couple of days, but as of right now, Thursday at 4, because it's 4 o'clock start now, right?
I believe so.
51 degrees at first pitch, which is not awful, but certainly not baseball weather.
Not baseball weather, but I've been there when it was 40 and rainy plenty of times for opening day, so I'll take it as long as there's no rain.
I will never forget. I think the last opening day that I was at was. Now this is going to seem like a million years ago. Do you remember John Mayberry's walk-off against the Astros?
It was a million years ago.
Which I believe the Astros were still in the National League at the time.
Wow.
But I remember John Mayberry's walk-off. I would say I was probably a freshman in college, I think. But it was very, very cold that day.
Well, I'm a college professor by trade. I made sure I had no classes on Thursday afternoons this semester so that I could go to opening day. Did the same last year for Monday, so it's a lot of moving and shaking to make sure I get there. But I really try to make sure I'm there every single time.
So we have like I said, just a little bit over a week away until opening day. We'll talk about the roster construction in just a little bit. I know, Frank, you want to kind of talk about this season as a whole because we are kind of in a unique setup. Heading into the 2026 season with what we all believe to be an impending, at least work stoppage heading into 2027. We'll do all that coming up on the show today. But first, let's talk about the WBC and an exciting game yesterday. Team Venezuela wins the WBC championship, as I said, 3-2. Bryce Harper, who had not been very good all WBC, was pretty much the entire offense for Team USA yesterday. The team just managed 3 hits. Bryce Harper had 2 of them, including the game-tying home run in the bottom of the 8th to make it 2-2. Venezuela scores in the 9th. I have a lot of mixed feelings about how Team USA has performed basically all WBC. And we talked about it last week with the manager not knowing the rules, or at least, it feeling like he didn't know the rules. They get in because, they needed some other team's help. Team Italy helps them out. They get in. And then they get on a little bit of a run. They beat who I believe to be the best team in the WBC in the semifinals in the Dominican Republic in what was an awesome baseball game. And then yesterday, the offense really just did not come to life. Noel McLean was solid enough. He rolls up the double play in the first inning. But I think, to me, Frank, it felt like that Team USA, despite the fact that they were unbelievably talented, kind of was playing with fire for a majority of the WBC.
Yeah, as I said last time, I felt that the Dominican Republic was the favorite to win this series, just because of what you're kind of pointing to. I think there's a certain sense of Team USA They all make millions of dollars. They all play at home all the time. There's just a little extra edge for some of these teams where this is like their one chance to put their country's name on their jerseys and play for them. And this I don't want to say, not to say that the Team USA had no country pride, but I feel like there was a little extra for those who did not necessarily get the opportunity to play at home time and time again. So I mean, I thought you could really see it in Team Venezuela. I thought they were a nice surprise at the last two rounds. They performed. I didn't miss either of those because they were something. Of course, Ranger Suarez had a start and didn't pitch great, but they overcame that very nicely. And then last night, I mean, Eduardo Rodriguez, who's had some injury issues over the years, who has struggled at times. He was lights out. In fact, I think they
Sure.
started him in the final to try to counteract their two lefties, Harper and Schwarber. But yeah, definitely definitely something that they really, really, really wanted from Team Venezuela. I think that made all the difference.
Well, and I think the one thing too is we talk about how how good Team DR was and how good the USA was. This is a good Venezuela lineup. I mean, you're talking about a former MVP in Ronald Acuna Jr. Michael Gonzalez, or excuse me, Michael Garcia, excuse me, was unbelievable for a majority of the of the tournament. Luis Ariz had an over 300 average. Eugenio Suarez comes up with a big double to take the lead. He only hit 200 in the series, but had a crucial hit when it mattered. Ezekiel Tovar was excellent. Wilyer Abreu was on the team. Salvador Perez is their captain. Jackson Churio is their 9-hole hitter. So it's not like it's a bad team by any stretch. It's a very impressive collection of talent. But I do think that when we were marking teams that we thought were the best, we did not initially bring up Venezuela. Not to say that they weren't good, but outside of the top three, being the three that we pointed to, Team USA, Team DR, and Team Japan, then it was kind of Venezuela probably found themselves in the next grouping of very talented, maybe not quite the talent level of what those other three teams were, but they're the final team standing and they're lifting the trophy because they got timely hitting. Pitching was, as you brought up, Eduardo Rodriguez was really good in yesterday's game, and it was a team that really just never conceded. And I thought, tip of the cap to them. They played a really sound game yesterday and got some crucial hits when it mattered, and their pitching was really good.
Yeah, I'm with you there. And by the way, is Ronald Acuna Jr. back? I mean, I know he's kind of had with injury and whatnot, kind of a quiet couple years. I mean, is he ready to start causing trouble in the NL East again?
I think so, and I think it's a big reason as to why I think the Braves are going to be much better than they were a year ago. They've had, I mean, really last year specifically, but they've had a slew of injuries over the last couple of seasons that really forced their hand in terms of, like, if you remember 2 years ago, by the end of the year, in meaningful games, they were starting Whit Merrifield at third. That was after the Phillies DFA'd him. And I think that they have had such a slew of injuries. If their pitching can be sustainable, and that's a big question, is how do they get bounce backs? When do guys return? I know a bunch of guys are either coming off of injury or still injured and will not make their appearances till later in the year. If they can kind of tread water until pitching finds its form, yeah, I think this Braves team is going to be a competitor again in 2026.
Yeah, and certainly if what you're seeing out of him, he just seems back. I mean, the Braves without Ronald Acuna Jr. were just completely a different team. So I just I think that this tournament, in a lot of ways, I think we can ask the bigger question: is this really indicative of where a player is at, including Philadelphia's own Bryce Harper?
Yeah, I think it's probably a fairer evaluation than, say, spring training. But I think with it being, we talked about this last week, if you could find a way to make this a tournament in July, you would then certainly get the best outcome and the best players like being at their peaks, like in full form type of thing, right? The pinnacle of their skill set. But I think this has more buying power in terms of, is a player back than spring training does.
So where do you think Bryce Harper is? I know there seemed to be a lot of chatter on the internet about how poorly he was doing along the way, but he comes up with a big 2-run home run last night.
Yeah.
So I mean that was like a classic Bryce moment.
Yeah, I think my big worry for heading into this year is how is he readjusting to fastballs? fastballs because he really struggled against fastballs late in the season. And I think that he was pressing. There's no doubt about it. I think the injury was there. And I also think that there was a weird, like, not to get too nerdy into baseball and like hitting and things like that, but there was a weird angle of his hands where his hands were almost the axis of his hands were tilted in a really weird way. And I just don't think he was generating any kind of power or torque. It looked cleaner yesterday than it had in the rest of the WBC and most of the back end of last season. I'm going to give him the benefit of the doubt because he's Bryce Harper, but I do expect him to have a better year, and I am going to hold him to that this year. Because, you and I talked about it a few weeks ago with the Dave Dombrowski comments of, was it a good year? Sure, it was a good year. Was it a Bryce Harper year? Absolutely not. And so I think, this year you do kind of hold him accountable for that. And I do wonder if this can maybe help get him going a little bit.
Yeah, of course, Bryce Harper dealing with that sore thumb, as it's often called. Doesn't sound like there's anything structural, but it's kind of one of those nagging injuries that doesn't go away, that he has to sort of learn how to play around. And maybe that has something to do with that bat, the way he held the bat, as you were just saying there, right? Could that be the reason why he was holding the bat a little funky?
So I guess if you had to ask me, if you had to say, like, are you expecting a better year from Bryce Harper in 2026? I would say yes. I would say the answer is yes. Now, I don't know if I'm expecting 30 home runs, but I'm expecting a higher average. I'm expecting a better slug. RBI are kind of contingent on guys ahead of him, but RBI situations, I'm expecting better results. Like, I don't think we're going to see MVP Bryce Harper. I'll be honest, I don't know if we ever see MVP Bryce Harper again, and that's okay heading into, what's he going to be, 32 or 33 this year? We are officially in the back half of that contract, which is crazy to say, but we are officially in the back half of the contract. I don't think we're going to see MVP Bryce Harper again, but I do think we see a better Bryce Harper in 26 than we did in 25.
Yeah, this is his age 33 season. He will turn 34 in the postseason, of course, provided the Phillies are there. It'll happen during the postseason. But speaking of the word postseason, you just had a little slip of the tongue a little while ago where you almost called the WBC tournament the postseason. So did it have that kind of feel?
I think it does, and it should. I don't know if it did for Team USA, if I'm being quite frank, but I do think it had that feel for every other country that was involved. And you brought it up, a bunch of times over the last few weeks, saying there's a passion of putting on your country, having the nameplate across your chest of your country's name and going out and representing your country, that I'm not going to say it lacked for Team USA, but it certainly lacked compared to some of the other countries that were in the Final Four or the Final Eight.
Now, I guess the one thing people keep saying here is the risk of injury, and everybody seems afraid. I mean, Tarek Skubal left the team, which is kind of unfortunate. I think that maybe the best pitcher in baseball leaves.
Yeah.
But people are worried about the injuries. I mean, this year the one is Seiya Suzuki, PCL strain in his right knee. That seems to be the one big injury, and they think he's actually going to be all right. So, any of that worry dissuaded this year about injury?
Yeah, I mean, with Skubal, I think specifically, I think if Skubal and the Tigers would have come to a deal this offseason, I think Skubal would have started yesterday's game. I think for Skubal specifically, I know he's making $32 million this season. I know people are going to go, why are you shilling for millionaires who are making 100 times what the average American makes? Not the point I'm trying to make. Long-term lockup in terms of a contract still has not gotten to Tarek Skubal yet. He has not signed that first massive, long-term deal. Yes, he is the highest paid arbitration eligible player ever, but I think in his case specifically, they could spin it however they want to spin it. Tarek Skubal wasn't going to pitch because of that exact reason. Now, you could always say Tarek Skubal is probably going to make 32 starts this year, barring injury. He could get hurt in any one of those starts. athletics and sports in general run risk injuries, right? Or injury risks, right? It's just part of the game. I could get hurt running around with my dog in the backyard, and that's hardly athletic. That's just, me being an idiot with my dog in the backyard. You know what I mean? So I think the injury risk is certainly there, but it's not like it's, I liken it to preseason football, where preseason football really means nothing. The WBC means something.
Yeah, Jesus Luzardo, I guess, is the other big name that was kind of famous for saying no. In fact, there was even a report that he got some threats after not agreeing to pitch for a team.
And
Venezuela.
that shouldn't be I know that we all love to see your country win a championship, but come on, it's baseball.
Yeah, and of course, Luzardo, for a lot of it, was negotiating a new contract. Maybe that's why he stayed home. And Luzardo, born in Peru, excuse me, and grew up in Florida. But I think he said it broke his heart that he was not able to be there. But he seems like the only other one that we've heard of that really said no.
Yeah, I think it'll be interesting because with Team USA specifically, there was a lot of, I don't want to call them aging veterans, but a lot of older veterans on the roster. You think about Harper, Schwarber. Not to say Judge is old. I still expect him to be a very solid hitter when the next WBC rolls around. But Bregman's a little bit older. Buxton's a little bit older. The one thing I will say, we talk about roster construction, Bobby Witt will be there. Gunnar Henderson will be there. I think Roman Anthony will be there. Paul Skeens will be there. The next WBC for Team USA could be a very different roster.
3 years is a long time. When
it is.
A lot of those guys are, as you said, Harper's 33. Is he going to do it again at 36? But yeah, I thought this was the first year where it really felt like you got, for the most part, though, the best of every potential roster. I think that in the past people shied away from it more, but I mean, with all the Phillies in it, I mean, the Phillies certainly seem to be supporting the the tournament, right?
Yeah.
If with Nola and taking the mound, and especially coming off an injury year. I mean, that's
sure.
That says a lot. And actually, I did want to speak of Nola. Had a pretty nice WBC, huh?
Yeah, I thought he was pretty good. Fastball velo looked better. Command and control was solid. I think I would be very, as much as we criticized Aaron Nola last season, I would be hard pressed to see him have as big of a struggle year as he did last year. I'm not expecting 3.2 ERA Aaron Nola to return, but I think if he pitches to a 3.7, it's a much better outcome than what you saw last year.
Yeah, and I think one of the worries was he was leaving spring training, and right around the time he's kind of hitting 4 and 5 innings. Well, he threw 5 and 4 in his 2 WBC starts, and he seems like he's pretty ready to go. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, like I said, my expectations are lowered, and I think his role is lowered, right? So now you have 2 constants at the top of the order, or at the top of the rotation, with Sanchez and Luzardo both locked up long term. Zach Wheeler is expected to return at some point, in the middle portions of late spring. So if it's sooner rather than later, you're talking about late April. Probably closer mid-May would be my guess. And then, you're hoping to rely upon Andrew Painter making the rotation. And at this point, I would imagine he probably will. Nola's ask at this point is to probably be a 3 or a 4, which I know people say, well, he's making $27 million. So he should be more than that. But, the money is already spent. Contracts are guaranteed in baseball. So once that money's spent, if it's a reevaluation of a role and he's successful in his new role, then I'm okay with it.
Weird to think that that's a new role.
Right. Because you're talking about a guy who, when he signed that contract, was the Phillies' legitimate bona fide number 2. It was Wheeler and it was him. And the emergence of Christopher Sanchez, the acquisition of Jesus Luzardo, the hope being Andrew Painter is everything that you hope that he can be. Even if Zach Wheeler does retire at the end of next year, you still have 3, maybe 4 guys ahead of him. And, Aaron Nola can comfortably slide in towards the back half of his career as a back end of the rotation guy. And again, $27 million is a lot of money, but you can kind of reimagine and reevaluate how that money is being spent when he's your fourth. If he pitches, like let's say he's your 4 and he pitches like a 3, that's at least an improvement. It's not going to totally, like if you are against the Aaron Nola contract, it's never going to sway you. And I know there's a lot of people out there that are like, that contract was bad. It made it, you signed it. Now Ranger Suarez walked because of it. I know there's people that feel that way. I think at the time the Phillies needed to keep starters in their rotation. They were using Syndergaard. They were using Falter. They were using Taijuan Walker every day or every 5th day. At the time, you needed to keep Aaron Nola in your rotation. Is it an overpay at this point? Probably. But I do think if you get him to bounce back from, maybe somewhere in between form and last year, then I think you've got something of a successful story at the middle to back end of your rotation.
Hey, and to me, it's just money. It's not my money. It's not your money. It's just money, right? They didn't have to give up any prospects to fill the rotation. I think I'm okay with it.
All right, so obviously one guy we know, Aaron Nola, is going to make the roster. No surprise there, and that's just me kind of transitioning to our next topic in the best way that I can. Let's talk about some guys that are kind of on the fringe of the 26, because we've talked about some of these guys a little bit throughout the season. One guy who has had a really, really good spring, was just reassigned to minor league camp, was Felix Reyes. 10 hits, 11 RBI, 3 home runs. Probably did not have a great shot to make the team, had options. But I had to give him a little bit of a shout out. Had a really good spring, a spring after winning the Double-A batting title for the Reading Fighting Phils. I thought he had a really nice spring.
He did. I guess the big question on him, and I think he opened up a lot of eyes, that's for sure. They don't really know where he's going to play.
Sure.
He's kind of been like,
and he's 25 already.
Yeah, he's 25 already. First base, DH, kind of really limits what you can do. So I think that's the real question there. Where are they going to use him? Could he play the outfield again? And he's played the outfield before, kind of got away from it. I know they don't seem to like his defense very much. At least that's, I'm not going to rule it out. All right. So, but his defense is really the question. So I can see him continuing on to AAA. Getting maybe like a Derek Hall a few years ago. Kind of force your way in if there's an opening, like through an injury or something. But there's really no clear place for him. But one nice thing about his bat is he's a right-handed bat, and that seems to be what the Phillies need. So if they can get him playing some left field every day, and maybe you don't feel so bad if you need to play him in left field for a little while if you've got an injury or something.
So the 3 names that kind of have been circulating throughout spring training, obviously, is Otto Kemp, who feels like a pretty secure lock at this point to make the roster. And then Brian De La Cruz and Pedro Leon. So De La Cruz and Kemp, no surprise, A, because of the fact that they want to see what they have from these guys, and B, because of the fact that a handful of Phillies are away on WBC duties, are second and third on the Phillies in spring training in terms of at-bats. The only player that has more at-bats than those 2 guys this spring training is Justin Crawford, and that makes total sense that Justin Crawford is getting that many at-bats. De La Cruz, 11 hits. He leads the team so far. Kind of what I expected, maybe not the average, but what I expected from De La Cruz was, the pop's not there as much as we had thought, just 2 extra base hits. He does have 11 hits. He's driven in 4 runs, and he's striking out a lot. He's striking out at a 33% clip, but he does have 11 hits to lead the team. And then Otto Kemp, his average is lower, just 211, but he's driving the ball. He has 6 extra base hits. He has 9 RBIs. He's also striking out at a pretty high clip. Just he's at 32.5%, just a little bit under Brian De La Cruz. But I would think if Kemp is what feels to be a lock to make the roster because he can play left, he can play third, I would think at this point that final bench spot comes down to De La Cruz. I guess Leon still has a chance. And then
Leon just optioned the minor leagues.
Oh, they did option.
They just optioned him to the AAA. He will not, but he did have an option. That was the one. I think that's one of the reasons they grabbed him is he had a minor league option. He's going to kind of go down to AAA and probably be what Rojas would have been if he was not suspended.
Okay, I did not see that. So I guess the news is he's. So at this point, Frank, is it Brian De La Cruz's spot to lose, or are we really going to see this Garrett Stubbs experience?
All right. So to address the Garrett Stubbs in left field situation, I think he's in left field because he's not the third string catcher. He's not the fourth string catcher. I think that they like him as a person. They kind of want him around, and I would say that this spring, Rene Pinto has surpassed him as on the depth chart for catcher. So
Sure.
I don't think they're really worried about losing him to waivers. He signed a split contract, which means he'd be paid one amount if he was in the major leagues and another amount if he's at AAA. I think he's going to get that higher than usual AAA salary and basically be an extra coach at AAA. I don't. And one of the reasons he's probably playing left field is he's going to play some of that down in Lehigh Valley because I think Pinto is going to get a lot of the work to be ready to be the next catcher up if the Phillies need a catcher. So I think I have as much chance making this roster as Garrett Stubbs right now.
It's funny. People get um, they get very you see something like that and the red flag immediately goes up and I think you're right. I think that was really just a can he play anywhere else when we send him down to AAA. Now, obviously, he also is out of options. He would have to pass through waivers. As you said, I would be stunned if another major league team claims him on waivers, just because of how limited the bat is. Pop time's always been good. He's, especially for being a little guy, he's always had a really strong arm. But the bat is not a major league caliber bat at this point. And I think probably he will start the year in AAA. My assumption was he'll probably be the starting catcher. But as you pointed out, if Pinto's, past him at this point, you're now talking about your fourth string catcher and your backup at the AAA level. And so I guess really what it is truly can he play anywhere else?
Yeah, and honestly, I don't even know if he can be the backup. I mean, Paul McIntosh is up there in years and still around, and Caleb Ricketts, a
Sure.
prospect, is still around. So I mean, yeah, you look at all these catchers. I know the Phillies needed catching depth. That was very, very clear last year. They've got a bunch of it. I mean, they grabbed McIntosh with the Luzardo trade last year just to have some more organizational depth. So I think they really don't need him as a catcher. So
Sure.
unless somebody claims him, I think he's headed down to AAA to be a utility player, maybe catch a little bit. I'm sure they'll have some assignments for him directly related to developing a particular pitcher or two or something of the sorts, using his major league experience. But I don't think that roster spot goes to him. I think actually Dylan Moore is the one to look at. He's
Sure.
got an opt out coming in within the next few days, really. And I tend to think that Otto Kemp is in. From what I've seen from him, I think I've seen the poise of a major leaguer with Kemp and the fact that they already really kind of expressed regularly how much they liked him over the offseason, even considering him as a potential stopgap third baseman if they needed to do that. I think he's the one that's going to be in that platoon with Brandon Marsh, and Dylan Moore. I think is then going to be the utility player. I think De La Cruz, who does not have an opt out until midsummer, I think he's going to end up at AAA.
Which makes sense. Obviously, at that point, if you do think that Kemp is the utility guy, if he's has the ability to platoon in left, he can play some third. I guess could play some first if called upon. I wouldn't do it, but I guess has the positional flexibility. Whereas De La Cruz is strictly an outfielder and a DH at this point of his career. Um, Moore gives you defensive flexibility. Moore is the guy that I think you would put into a game late if let's say you had Otto Kemp in the game, he was playing third for we give him Bowman night off, and late in the game you wanted defensive flexibility. That's where you would put Moore in the game. He can give you a couple different, he can play a couple of different positions. I believe he's won a Gold Glove at some
He
point in his
won a Gold
career.
Glove as a utility player. Yeah.
And so I think that makes sense. I always think about my final spot on my roster as somebody I would like some pop off the bench. And so that is kind of why I would lean De La Cruz. But your reasoning in terms of, the opt-outs and the ability to go find another team does lead to potentially believe that maybe they are going to go with Moore, and De La Cruz will be sent to AAA, and they'll kind of see what he does over, the first 150 at bats of the spring for Lehigh Valley.
Yeah, see, I agree with you in that I want Pop off the bench, but you need that later. You need that as you head towards the playoffs. Right now, for the long grind of the long season, you probably need somebody you can plug in at any position. Just because there could be an injury in a game, you want to take somebody out. I see that last bench spot as the guy that plays the least, So
Sure.
now that there's a DH, there's not a pinch hitter every few innings for once the starter comes out. I really think that for the long haul of a long season, you want to have somebody you can just plug in, say, oh, wait a minute. Edmundo Sosa was already in after
Right.
Bryson Stott. He tweaked something. All right, let's grab Dylan Moore and throw him at second. I think that's the kind of situation where you want to have a player that you could just put anywhere. And really, except for pitcher and catcher, that's what Moore is at this point. So I think that he's going to get that final roster spot. But I think the one thing that baseball has really lost by making the trade deadline July 31st and taking out that waiver option is really hard to throw that player with some pop on your bench. Like the Phillies grabbed Matt Stairs at the end of August in 2008, and the rest is history, right? Don't have the ability to make that kind of move anymore for that guy with pop, as you said. So I would consider at the regular trade deadline figuring out that question of who your guy with pop on the bench is. But for right now, going into a long season, I think that Moore might be the one to have. And you know what, De La Cruz, if he's got a midsummer opt out, then maybe they consider him then.
Sure.
But having someone who can just plug holes, I think, is a very useful thing to have for now.
All right, final thing we wanted to get into before we wrap up today's show. As we said, we're just 8 days away from opening day, and this is kind of a unique start to a season, as we've alluded to several times. I really don't know what's going to happen at the end of the 2026 season and when the collective bargaining agreement, comes to end. It could be a quick decision. I imagine it's probably not a quick decision. And does it impact baseball in 2027? And so when you and I were kind of going through our run of show at the beginning of the morning, one of the things we talked about was just enjoying the year. And you kind of brought it up, so I want to let you kind of to lead this one. In terms of enjoying the year, is it more baseball as a whole? Is it enjoying the Phillies specifically? Because I know there's a lot of expectations for this team, and fans are kind of right on the precipice of, I don't want to say dumping this team, but right on the precipice of, 4 years in a row, you've done this to me. Don't pull the football away from me, Lucy, as I go to kick it, right? So, like, for you, is it baseball as a whole? Is it this iteration of the Phillies team? Where are you kind of looking at it from that standpoint?
So the biggest thing I got from my time down in spring training. So I went twice, as we said. The first time I get the press passes, did work in the box, et cetera, et cetera. Got to really dig in around. And then the second time I just hung out with friends because it's March and I want to get warm. So, but it just seemed like when I was there around everything, it was almost a foregone conclusion that there's going to be a long work stoppage. And how long? I think that's up for debate. I think we're going to hear a lot more things this baseball season about how well it's not going with the MLB PA and MLB. So my main thought was, hey, enjoy this season while you can. We don't know when or what form there'll be baseball next year. 2022, it was a quick lockout, relatively speaking. I know I went down there and only got to see minor league players in March because they didn't really agree for a few weeks into what would have been normal spring training. But yeah, I just get the feeling that this could go on a long time. That the Phillies themselves are putting together a fund to help pay employees during the work stoppage. MLBPA has a fund going to help pay players that don't have anything during the work stoppage. You saw a lot of the contracts signed this offseason have signing bonuses that are partially distributed next year. This is just coming together to look like that there's some trouble ahead. So I guess my best advice is, hey, next week's opening day, enjoy it, have fun.
The first red flag, and obviously, when you hear that the collective bargaining agreement is coming to an end, obviously, you have to assume that they're going to butt heads a little bit. That's just, I always say, anytime it's owners versus players, eventually somebody gives ground. More times than not, it does end up being the players that give ground, the MLBPA, the NFLPA, they end up giving a little bit of ground to get a CBA sign. My bigger concern, the first big red flag that popped up was when you start hearing about salary caps, salary floors, you start hearing about owner versus owner, and they're not going to budge. And then you throw in the wrinkle of, you hear like Bryce Harper, Rob Manfred's going around the league last year, and Bryce Harper basically tells Rob Manfred to get the bleep out of our clubhouse. And there's like 7 guys in Major League Baseball who have the cachet to say that to the commissioner. Bryce Harper just happens to be one of them. But you start to have owners versus owners, and you call it quote unquote rich versus poor owners, and players of the standard and cachet of Bryce Harper who are locked into these long-term deals who are fighting back on it. All of these things put together don't give me the warm and fuzzy feeling about a proper start to 2027.
Yeah, this is a situation where the TV contracts have really messed things up. You might have been following, there have been some bankruptcies of regional sports networks, and then someone buys it, and then they go bankrupt. And you have some teams this year that are basically streaming the games on their own or independently trying to get cable providers to
I think the Diamondbacks are one of them.
Yeah, the Braves. I mean, there were like 9 teams. Maybe if you remember, Bally Sports was the first one to kind of go in there, and then it became Diamond Sports, and then it was like the FanDuel Sports Network. Although FanDuel was just a paid sponsor of the name, so that the real owners could hide. but yeah, it's been a really tough situation with the contracts. Now the Phillies, their regional sports network is NBC Universal owned, right? So if they lose money on this one contract, well, then you have all of NBC and Universal to fall back on. But a lot of these TV contracts are falling apart, and that's a significant revenue loss for these teams. So I mean, it's Philly's a pretty big market. Now they're the 5th biggest market in the United States, so it might be working out for NBC Sports Philadelphia, but San Diego, Pittsburgh, Kansas City, a lot of these, if you can't get a TV deal because now people have cut the cord, as they say, and they were used to every. So I always tell my students this. So my 97-year-old grandmother in a nursing home, in her cable package, she has to pay for ESPN. She has to pay for the regional sports network, whether she watches it or not. And I assure you, she does not. So as people cut the cord because they're not watching this stuff, that's a major financial loss for these cable companies, and then it turns into a major financial loss for these franchises. So I think there's a lot to work out. They haven't totally figured it out yet. Now, they say a lot of the young people, they just want to be able to stream the games as they want to stream them, and they haven't totally figured out how to do that yet. In Philly, we have some options, but I think there's a lot to figure out, and it's a very complicated question, which makes me worry because it is owner against owner. Because hey, the Yankees, they can start the Yes Network and make their own money off of it. But
I think about you bring up the streaming and whatnot. So my wife and I have lived together now for almost 5 years, and we have for 0 days of those almost 5 years had a cable television package. So we have always been YouTube TV. It's easy, it's convenient. Now I will say the package that I bought into specifically to get NBC Sports Philadelphia was somewhat of an upgrade. Like, it wasn't much. We're talking about an extra like $9 a month or something like that. I get probably another 200 channels, but I specifically bought it for NBC Sports Philly to get the Phillies games because I wasn't getting it on YouTube TV's basic package. But still, even that, I know my YouTube TV package is cheaper than the whole collective, as you were bringing up your grandmother's, 900 channels that you have to buy into. I'm sure for whatever provider that is providing that service, YouTube TV is probably still cheaper. And so as more and more people go to that way of life, it becomes harder and harder to figure out how do you get a TV package for, I don't. Again, you bring up the Yankees or the Dodgers, right? I know the Dodgers had the fallout and the bankruptcy, and that's part of the reason as to why they're able to spend as much money as they are.
Mm-hmm.
But these littler clubs, the Marlins, the Pirates, the White Sox, you name it. It's got to be. It has to be a pressing issue for them specifically.
Yeah, so I think there's a lot. There's so much to work out. Again, owner versus owner, as you said, that I just don't see this. And then of course the owners to the players, because MLB has been the one place where they've kind of skirted around a salary cap. So,
Right.
and honestly, these luxury tax penalties, or the competitive balance tax, as it's officially called, those penalties are not deterring people like the Dodgers, right? So they got to do something. I don't know what it is. I don't think they know what it is. So I just think that this is going to be the last regular season for a while.
Well, let's hope not. But I think you're now. So like, when you say for a while, do you think they play it all next year?
I can see them not. I mean, I don't want to
Really?
speculate, but I think this is going to be a long, drawn out thing. So I'm
A lot of
when
us
you
are going to
think,
be out of jobs, Frank.
thinking about the 94s and the 81s, like this could be the next big one that we talk about in history.
Well, that would certainly be disheartening, but there's a case to be made for sure. I think this is going to be a long, drawn out process. What I do know is that we have baseball this year, and we have baseball in just over a week. So the next time that we talk to you will be just a day before opening day. So, Frank, I always like to do this. I don't know how you feel about it, but I always like to do my season projections. Kind of like to do predictions. Like, I think the Phillies are going to win 94 games. But I like to do projections as, do you think that this team is going to improve or decline heading into 2026? So we'll kind of throw around some ideas as we get set towards opening day.
Looking forward to that. Hard to believe that the roster should be set by the time I talk to you next.
Yeah, so next Wednesday, I would imagine the 26th will be in place. Phillies get set for opening day Thursday against the Texas Rangers. I believe a 4:05 start. So we have one final spring training show before we get you, or spring training show before we get you set for the regular season, and we'll do that next week on next Wednesday, right here on the Run It Back podcast. So for Frank Klose, I'm Tyler Zulli saying thank you so much for hanging out with us. As always, hit the thumbs up button if you're watching on YouTube. Leave a like and a comment down below as well. Subscribe to the channel, and if you're listening on any of our streaming platforms, we sure would appreciate a 5-star review as well if you like what you're listening to. We'll talk to you next week right here on the Run It Back podcast. See ya.